This episode has very sensitive topics, is for mature audiences only, and contains depictions of various forms of trauma. Viewer discretion advised.
One thing that a cult does is they completely and utterly destroy your sense of self-worth. And they do that over years and years and years and years. The reason that Stephen stopped sexually molesting me on a daily basis, I might add, was because my mother found it disturbing that it was two men, that because it was homosexual. That was the problem. It wasn't the fact that he was touching me as a boy or as a child. If you are a victim of child or child rape, it is almost as bad to talk about what happened to you as it actually is to do that to a child. That's what I absolutely hate about our society. Our society is used like we accept it. Oh, you're a woman, chances are you'll get once in your life. It's just we accept that as normal. But if a man or a boy gets raped, it's like, yeah, are you sure that was really rape? Or maybe you wanted it? Or it's so much less talked about. I lost my childhood, okay? I lost all my teenage years. I lost most of my adult life trying to figure out how to survive. And the last little bit of dignity I have left is to tell my story and the veritas of my story and of the person who I am.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening, jump on over to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness, or you can join in on the conversation, like, subscribe, comment. It means so much to our guests and to us. When you comment, leave those words of encouragement for our guests who are bravely telling their stories. They are real people, guys, and it means so much to them when you can leave those kind words. So today's guest, he's a repeat guest. We had him on about a year ago, so we will do a little bit of a refresher of his story from the Children of God, mostly raised in India, what it took for him to escape as a teenager. And this episode, we're going to zoom in on the parts that we missed last time, which were how he was homeless for a majority of his life and how he was able to get back on his feet through music. And also today we're going to discuss what are the consequences of coming forward and telling your story, what it was like coming forward on this show, and maybe some of the ramifications that happened because of that. So thank you so much for joining us, Philip Seibel.
Hi, Shalise. Nice to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. And you're tuning in from Germany, right?
From Switzerland, actually.
Switzerland.
But
were you in Germany last time?
no, I've been living in Switzerland for many years now. I have three Swiss children, and they all speak very strong Swiss German, which is sometimes even hard for me as a father to understand.
Okay, but you were in Germany at some point. Am I just totally making that up?
Well,
Part of your story was in Germany?
I traveled a lot prior. Okay, I'm a father now since about 18 years. And the last 18 years of my life have been mostly just trying to make ends meet, working odd jobs. Yeah, being a father to my kids, mostly living from like transport jobs, working in factories, music, of course, doing gigs, playing on the street. But before I became a father, I was basically from my 15th year until I was about 24 years old. I basically traveled Europe with a backpack, a djembe. Actually, I have it right here. This is the actual djembe I traveled with all over Europe as a homeless dude, and a guitar. I traveled many times through Germany, England, Denmark, France, Spain, yeah, all over the place.
Okay, right. So my memory did not serve me. It was a year ago. I'm going to give myself grace there. And I was pregnant. But I digress. So let's go back a little bit. I want to give people a little bit of a refresher if they've never heard of Children of God. My description, it is, in my opinion, one of the most insidious cults that we've ever covered. Basically trying to essentially get children to have sexual relations with each other, with adults. Horrible, horrible stuff. We went into detail in your first interview, which you so vulnerably shared with us, and I appreciate that. And then you escaped when you were a teen. So if there's anything that you want to share from your childhood before you want to talk about the actual escaping and what that meant for you.
Yes, actually, it's funny. I just did a couple days ago a video on my own YouTube channel called PTSD and the daily ramifications or the consequences of dealing with it, and how things that you do for like years and years and years as an adult, because that's what you do. That's like what you're trained to do, and then all of a sudden, like, it just hits you like a brick wall or like a truck, and then you just end up like, sitting in your car and crying your eyes out because you're like, oh my God, what the. I'll just go very briefly into that because I did like a whole half an hour thing on my channel, so you can go check that out if you want. But basically, when we were kids, we were forced to go and make money for the cult. So that would involve either like going singing on the streets or going door to door, selling video cassettes, tapes, posters, or also going to shops. As young as like 9, 10 years, 11 years old, I would have to go with my mom to these outreach fundraising missions, and sometimes like we'd end up being in a hotel for like a week, like in Geneva or Lausanne, and every day, like for 12 hours a day, selling cassettes, selling posters, selling videos. And of course, when I was like preteen, I loved doing it because I felt like that was something, oh, this is what I'm good at. I could smile, I could say, hi, you want to talk about God, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Then slowly but surely it started to dawn on me that it's actually really embarrassing to do this, for me at least. And then so I stopped going with my mother to do that, and I would end up like just telling her, oh no, just go on your own, and I would stay at the hotel and watch Cartoon Network all day and go outside and bum cigarettes off people and see if I could like scrounge a couple francs to go eat something or whatever, because of course if I didn't like go with her to make any money, hell, she was going to give me like any money to go buy myself a sandwich or some food for the day, right? So I'd just be hungry all day until she came back. But here's the point. The point of is at some point my mother started really strongly gaslighting me, as my father did as well, like, oh yeah, you're sloth, you're lazy, you don't want to help serve the Lord. And then we're going to take then my mother would start taking my younger brother to go witnessing because he was younger than me, and he was still like, oh yeah, this is fun, let's go with mommy and go outreaching or whatever. And of course, because I didn't get taken, then I had to stay at home and do like chores all day and wash dishes and clean up the kitchen, shovel snow, and do all the menial labor that I hated doing. And so I was like stuck in this thing where I was like, well, either I stay at home and like get beat up by the older teens and get yelled at by the adults, get punished constantly, or I can go do something that's so totally embarrassing with my mother, but at least I'm outside and I'm not in the commune, you know what I mean? So it's like always like this ambivalence between the fire and the pan. And the thing that struck me the most about this time was in Switzerland. I mean, I don't know if it's like that in the US, but in Switzerland, like, people are very nice up front. So even if they think you're like completely crazy or cuckoo or whatever, they'll be like, oh yes, no, it's so nice and how interesting or whatever. And then they'll try to like get rid of you as quickly as possible, right? So I already grew up in this kind of like culture where no one says anything directly to your face, but then behind your back, everyone's like talking, oh, this guy is a lunatic or whatever. And I started realizing that this is how people would look at my mom or my dad. They'd be like, oh yeah, that's so interesting. And then as soon as we'd leave, they'd be like, oh my God, what crazy people or whatever. So by default, that also meant because I was with them, that I was crazy too, right? So what happened was I was like in Bern selling my t-shirts, distributing flyers for my print shop. And then I got in the car and then I just had this like cold realization. Fuck, what if every single one of these people that I went to just thought that I was a fucking weirdo, wasn't interested in me or my product at all, but were just like smiling nicely, just like, get out of here, you know what I mean? And that completely destroyed me for a second, because one thing that a cult does is they completely and utterly destroy your sense of self-worth. Mm-hmm. And they do that over years and years and years and years. So if you're like cooperative and willing and supportive and helpful, then of course they'll build you up and be like, oh yeah, you're so great and so spiritual and oh my God, and you're like awesome or whatever. But if you like start falling behind, you don't bring enough money into the fold, you say, oh, you're sick or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, God's punishing you. So there's like this constant like fear of becoming an outcast, right? And this fear of being worthless, being a nobody, that's almost as bad or worse than the actual physical punishment side of it too. Because that's also a side that it doesn't just involve your body, as in you getting punished or whipped or locked in isolation, but it's something that involves everything else, so that like even your siblings, the other children, they're also ignoring you. They're like, oh yeah, he's not a good apple, he's a rotten apple, he's toxic, or that's very early on. Those were already the very harsh consequences of when I then finally left. I had to like rebuild all of that for myself, rebuild my own self-esteem, rebuild who I am, my own image of myself. And I think to this day, that's something I have not fully managed to do.
Yeah, I think you touched on something that's really important, which is the physical can heal, it can go away, the bruises and everything, but the mental abuse, the emotional abuse, that's something that follows you, and that's something that sticks with you because you're learning who you are as a young child based on the programming that you're receiving. Those are your internal messages, that internal voice that's telling you who you are, if you're worth anything. And then when you leave, even if you physically get away from the people who are doing that, you still have that inner programming that's running unless you actively counter it. If you go to a therapist or find ways to help you heal that inner child, to heal that inner voice, to rebuild individuality, or to create individuality to begin with, because cults don't want you to be individual. They want you to fit into this box, and they want you to be exactly who they tell you that you should be. So I think it's important that you bring that up, that even once you leave, you can still have these demons that follow you unless they're properly addressed, or unless they just come out one day in a parking lot and you realize it's something that needs to be addressed. And so I do think that's really important.
I think also that's why, if I may touch on my books for a second, I am putting out a series of 3 books, and the names that I gave these books are very consequent because it's exactly that journey. The first book is called The Monsters That Kiss You Goodnight. It's the monsters that shape you, that make you who you are, the ones that torture you and beat you and rape you even, instead of loving, nurturing, and caring for you, and that think you're like their servant, that you need to go make money for them, and you need to clean up the dishes, and you need to cook, and you need to do all of that stuff, even though you're supposed to be a kid and enjoying life, right? And then the second book, The Monsters That Walk With Me, is exactly that. It's the analogy of, so you might be away from the actual physical monsters that did all this stuff to you, but they still fester and they still linger inside of you. And you have to carry this with you by yourself, like all this anxiety and this fear. And like me, when I was a younger man, I had a very, very dark thoughts. Like if somebody was very abusive or outright threatening, my mind would just directly go to annihilation. Like, seriously, I saw everything as like this dichotomous black and white when I was after leaving the cult. Because I mean, yeah, I grew up like that. So it's like either it's good or it's bad. There's no gray zone. If you would have asked me as a 20-year-old, oh, if a man rapes a child, should he be immediately murdered? I would have said, yeah, no questions asked. Now at my age, I'd be like, yeah, are we sure he did it? And I mean, yeah, if you catch somebody in the act, okay, but I see everything a little bit more adult-like now, not so black and white anymore. You know, there are certain situations where, for example, the death penalty for murder, right? Even if you're like caught in the act of murdering somebody, maybe that person was harming your children or whatever. So there's a lot of ways to think as an adult that need to be cultivated in the proper context. And if you run away as a child at the age of 15, and you have no clue about the outside world. Like, I mean, if you would have asked me at the age of 17, 18, should homosexuality be tolerated? I would have said, hell no, because I grew up thinking that homosexuality is a sin, until a certain point in my life where I started realizing maybe the whole reason why I'm so homophobic is that maybe I'm also partially attracted to men myself, right? So there's like this whole area of life that you have to discover for yourself without adults, without teachers, without family. You have to learn this all on your own. And in that sense, these monsters that you take with you is the lack of education, bigotry. It's being very one-sided about things, being very uneducated. I could go on and on. That's the whole point from a philosophical point of view, that no 15-year-old should be just thrown out into the world with no idea about what the real world looks like, and then just be expected to just figure everything out on their own, right? So that's what I go into on the second book, The Monsters That Walk With Me. It's this whole mental journey also of somebody who has this extreme sense of right and wrong, extreme black and white way of thinking, and anything that's not within that is just no. Not even gonna go there, you know what I mean? And then learning how to be more tolerant, to be more open and honest. And I mean, yeah, if you would have met me at the age of 20, you would have probably been like, this guy is a lunatic, you know? And you would have been right. But that's the sad thing, you know, it's like, you know, I didn't want to be like that, but nobody actually, you know, like I said before, Switzerland is the kind of country where people don't say that stuff to you. And if you don't have I have kids, right? So if my son says something horribly homophobic or misogynistic or whatever, I'll be pulling him aside and be like, dude, you can't say shit like that, you know? I didn't have anyone to do that for me. So I wandered Europe for many years thinking, oh, everyone loves me. And behind my back, people were like, oh, my God.
Well, I think what you're saying is the trauma that you endured, it shaped your perspectives, and you didn't have any understanding of nuance or context because everything was so black and white. And so when you went into the real world outside of the commune walls, you were just completely alone and not understanding what's necessarily right. You know, you left this extreme group, and now you're probably wanting to go the opposite direction and maybe even overcorrect, which I don't know if you did, but that tends to happen when you don't have any guidance or you don't have any boundaries for yourself, because you have to create boundaries. But the last thing that anyone wants to do when they leave a high control group is put boundaries around themselves. Usually people are like, no, I want to try everything. And that can also be dangerous if you don't have any guidance. So talk to us about specifics. What did that look like for you when you're 15? You escaped the cult, you're on your own. Tell us how you got by.
I'll start at the beginning. I met this British busker. He was 42 years old at the time. I was 15. And I mean, already just there, right? Like this was the 90s. So I saw him playing the song, which I would like to sing for you later. It's a song that actually completely changed my life. It's called Little Black Sheep. I was actually supposed to meet my stepfather, Stephen, who is also one of the people that sexually assaulted me when I was a small child. I was supposed to meet up with him. They were going to figure out what to do with me because I had run away from the boarding school that they put me in because I was getting beat up all the time. Long story. So anyway, so I'm leaving the youth hostel, and there's this man sitting in a tattered old, cardigan with some cigarette holes in it, playing on an old beat up guitar. And so I go closer because I played on the street all the time already as a kid. So I knew that game, So for me, this was like, oh, this seems familiar. Let's go listen to him, And then he started to sing this song, Little Black Sheep. And I'm standing there on the cobblestone next to the river, and I just completely tear up. And I pull myself together. I go sit next to him and be like, oh man, that's such a nice song, whatever. And we start talking. And I'm like, I do street music too and stuff like that. And I lied to him. I told him I was like 18. I think he would have never talked to me otherwise. And I mean, I did look much older than I was at the time. So he's like, yeah, what are you doing? And I explained to him a little bit, oh yeah, I'm thinking about what to do with my life. My parents are in a cult. I really don't want to be there anymore. And then he just gives me the guitar and he's like, hey, sing something. If you say you're a singer or whatever. Back then, I only knew cult songs. Mm-hmm. And we had I think 3 or 4 system songs, which was, I think, Country Roads, Let It Be, and then some Christmas songs, right? That was all the songs I knew. In the boarding school, I learned a ton of other material, but I couldn't play it on the guitar. I didn't know the chords. I just kind of sporadically knew. And I always had this ear for music. So if you gave me a guitar and started singing, I would find you and I would just start playing along. It was just something I can do. So I think I sang I sang Let It Be. And I was so embarrassed. And he's like, oh, you got a really good voice. And I'm like, okay, thanks, I guess. And then we just went busking together. And he sang a song or two. I sang Country Roads and Let It Be. Mm-hmm. And then he sang again. And then we passed the hat. We made over 100 Swiss francs. And I was like, fuck yeah. So I took my share of the money and I went into a music store and I bought myself a pair of bongos because I could also play percussion. And then I went back to him and I was like, I bought these bongos. You want to do a duo? And that was it. And then basically from there, I called Steven on a payphone later that evening, and we had already made like $300 each, which for me as a 15-year-old, I was like, I'm a millionaire, you know?
Yeah.
I put some money in a payphone. Steven answers the phone, and all I say to him is, fuck you. Hung up the phone, and then I didn't see him for like 10 years.
Oh my God. Steven, your stepdad.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
I ran into him occasionally. Sometimes I'd see him and I'd be like, hey. And he's like, oh, you want to come back and serve the Lord? I'm like, fuck no. And you're like, okay.
My gosh, he knew you were probably a lost cause at that point.
Yeah. Well, he was also telling my siblings that I was like a drug addict and addicted to heroin and an alcoholic and that I would die in a gutter. And weirdly enough, Steven was so good at gaslighting my children, my siblings against me, that even all these years later, now like my younger brothers, they still think that I'm like a liar or I'm not always honest or that I'm always exaggerating things, because that's the power that Stephen had over their young minds at the time, because they were still prepubescent, you know what I mean? Even now, my youngest brother just flatly refuses to believe that Stephen ever sexually abused me as a kid. And I actually made a video on YouTube, which I now took down because I don't want to get like arrested, but I basically told him, it's like, dude, come to Switzerland, say that to my face, and you can imagine what the next words that were coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, that's hard, especially after everything that you went through. Did your siblings ever, or well, I guess they did escape because you're still talking to them, or?
Well, no. Okay, it's like this. My other brother, the other one who's next in line to me, he actually wrote my youngest brother after all of that, and he was like, oh, that's really fucked up to say that shit to Phil, because I was there, and I can also testify that our parents not only sexually abused him, but they also abused me. But he will never ever go public, and I will never ever say his name or anything because I respect his privacy, obviously. But yeah, I mean, we were all sexually assaulted in some form or way or another. There is also somebody, another person who's like 2 years my senior, who also stated that she actually saw Stephen sexually assault the other children as well when they were toddlers. That was apparently a thing that he did. Yeah, it's disgusting. Anyway, like I said, I think the reason why I remember my sexual assault so well is because he was still doing it to me right up until my youngest brother was born when I was 6 years old. And like I said in my first interview with you, and I've repeated countless times in other interviews as well, the reason that Stephen stopped sexually molesting me on a daily basis, I might add, was because my mother found it disturbing that it was two men, because it was homosexual. That was the problem. It wasn't the fact that he was touching me as a boy or as a child. It was her problem was it was two men making love. Anyway. And she actually got one of the other shepherds in the commune in New Delhi. And I remember the day as clear, like for me, it could have happened yesterday. That's how clear I remembered it, because it was one of the most joyous occasions in my life. Having Stephen call me into the room and say, we're no longer allowed to have sex with each other, but if you want to continue doing it, then we just have to keep it a secret. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm disappointed, and I thought you loved me, but it's... And he tried to fucking gaslight me on it too. He tries to make me to like continue, but then mommy shouldn't know and all that. I remember that conversation like it was fucking yesterday. So my youngest brother wasn't born when that conversation happened, and he has no fucking right to open his goddamn mouth about shit that happened to me, the most horrific shit that happened to me in my entire life. Well, he wasn't even on this planet. And I'm sorry for the viewers out there who are offended by the F word and whatever, but sometimes it's necessary to use those words to drive the point home at how horrific stuff like that can be.
I saw a lot of comments on the last one, like, you should tell your guests not to use strong language. And I'm like, I think you said it on a few comments, like, that's what you're offended about is the language and not the sexual assault of children. It's just, I mean, I get it. Some people are a little more sensitive to that. But guys, please be aware that there are other things that hold more weight than a word that we have deemed wrong or bad. So anyways, Phil, tell your story however you would like, however it feels right to you. Thank you for sharing that. That's so hard. I understand what it's like for someone to call you a liar and not believe you for something that's so horrific. And so I'm sorry that that happened to you and that you're still holding those feelings. Some of the things that I've heard from this group, and it's not just you. I mean, I've interviewed people from all over the world in the Children of God, and it is the same stories, and it is horrific, and it is awful. And I think some people can't find it in themselves to think that it's true because it's so awful that what that would mean if it were true for them is just mind-blowing and earth-shattering. It's hard for people to comprehend that actually happens or happened. And so in some ways I can understand where they're coming from, but also that this is not the page to comment that. We are supportive of our guests and we're not trying to gaslight them even further. They've been through enough. So yes, I just wanted to put that out there. Let's get back to your story though.
People, at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't believe you, then you honestly, okay, to all those out there, listen to me very, very, very carefully now. So why would I go on national TV, on international TV? And Shelley's is by far not the only interview I've done. I've done interviews in front of over 20 million viewers live. Why would I do that to willingly, completely trash my reputation? I live in a small town. My children go to a school where you could probably count on a few hands and a few feet how many children there are in a class. Why would I deliberately, completely trash my reputation, completely make it impossible for me, which we will get to later, this is the whole point of the interview, is the consequences of speaking out. Why would I risk never ever being able to find another job in Switzerland, not getting any gigs anymore, being thrown out of bands, which has happened. I got thrown out of bands because of interviews I've done on TV here in Switzerland. Why would I risk to basically lose my career as a musician, as an artist? I don't have a school degree. I don't have education. It's very hard for me to find work. So why would I risk losing the tiny little bit of chances of work that I have to make up a story like that? Yeah. What does it benefit me?
Yeah, you're not gaining.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. Even my stepfather said that too. Like he, after I was on TV, like there's another like big organization in Germany that is against, the statutes of limitations, and they fight it. They also have like 500,000 followers and all that. And Stephen wrote them and saying, oh yeah, he has false memory syndrome. He's making it all up because he wants to, in German, he said erbetteln, which means like to grovel for money. He's making all of this up so he can grovel for money. Do I look broke to you?
Oh,
yeah. People will always, always find like, oh yeah, he needs money or he wants the attention or whatever. It's like, I could sing 4 full octaves. I've been on TV. I mean, not as an activist, but like when I was 18, 19 years old, I was a model. I was on live shows. I was invited to Broadway once, which I declined because I was having problems with my girlfriend at the time. I was on national TV in Belgium doing a soap. I traveled the world. I've had a great time touring all over Europe, playing in Irish circuits, playing all over the place. I don't need the attention, okay? I wanted to stop playing music. When I became a father of my oldest daughter, I sold my last guitar. Because I wanted to hide from the world. I didn't want that life anymore. And the only reason why I started playing music again is because it was really hard for me to find a job that didn't pay like complete peanuts, because, that's all you get if you don't have any qualifications. So to answer that question, to anyone who says, oh yeah, he's making up stories because he needs attention. Guys, I don't need attention. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to empower other people to be able to speak out. And yes, there are very harsh consequences to speaking out, and it is harsh. But I'm doing this because I want to make the world a place where you are not stigmatized for being a victim. Because that's what I absolutely hate about our society. If you are a victim of child or child rape, it is almost as bad to talk about what happened to you as it actually is to do that to a child. That's the horrible thing, and that's why I'm so against it, and that's why I think it needs to be normalized in our society that a person who has experienced these horrific acts of violence against themselves, against their integrity, against their body, should be able to speak out without fear of losing their jobs, without fear of losing their loved ones, without fear of being called a liar or whatever, without fear of being stigmatized, without fear of people looking at them on the street like they're scum. You know what I mean? That's
I
why
think I think I want to dive into that more because I'm curious about your experience. I know that, and I'm not saying it's not true. I think that other people have had other experiences speaking out as well that aren't necessarily as negative, but I do think it's important to talk about the ones that are negative because that's a very real experience too. So what were some of the consequences of going public? Let's talk about specifics and things that you had to deal with because of sharing your story.
Well, I can give you a very concrete one. Last year, I was asked to play bass in this band, and after I showed up with my bass and everything like that, the guitarist went over to the lead singer and said to her, "If this guy continues to play in the band, I'm quitting. I don't think that he can separate his trauma with being a professional musician. I can't stand to be with him in the same room because then I have to constantly think about all this negative stuff that he's always talking about in the media." One example.
Wow.
If you think that's an isolated incident, no, that actually happened to me several times. What I also realized is last year I did some pretty big TV shows, and at the same time I was looking for gigs for the winter. And before I was like, maybe out of 10 venues I would write, I would get answer from at least 2 or 3. And all of a sudden, after I went on air, I just realized like all my emails were just unanswered. I would just go getting completely ghosted by everyone, or like when I would put out ads for like, oh, I'm looking for a band or I'm looking for a drummer or this or that. Nothing. Zero. And I mean, I'm a good singer. I'm a very seasoned musician, And like this year, it's already been getting slightly better again. Like I put out an ad and then already some guys were like writing me and stuff like that. And the other thing I also realized is like with looking for work, of course, I try to constantly apply for like jobs here and jobs there or whatever. And I just realized that as soon as people, because I mean, nowadays, if you apply for a job, the first thing they do is they go on Facebook or they, and if you punch my name into Google, the first whole page is just me, right? So, and then people start reading that and they're like, yeah, I don't know if this is a good look for my company and stuff like that. And it's the same all across the board. It's the same like with the t-shirt sales. It's the same with everything because now I have like the stamp on my head that I'm a victim of childhood sex. My stepfather had sex with me. So in some weird ways, maybe I'm also a pervert, or maybe I'm sick in the head or whatever. But as but this is something we don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And I think in some way the stigma against men speaking out about sexual abuse is much higher than with women because we're used to women being raped. We're used to, sorry that I say it that bluntly, but our society is used like we accept it. Oh, you're a woman, chances are you'll get raped once in your life. It's just we accept that as normal. But if a man or a boy gets raped, it's like, yeah, are you sure that was really rape? Or maybe you wanted it, or it's a different kind of stigmatization because it's so much less talked about. But if you actually look, like if you do a little bit of research, you find that the suicide stats of male rape victims, of rape in general, it's across the board. It's very similar. It's just one side is much more in the public eye, That's just kind of the experience that I have. And that's why I think I need to keep this in the public eye. I just keep saying it. Look, just because something awful happened to me as a child doesn't make me any less of a human being. It doesn't make me any less of a professional musician. I got accused by one dude. He wrote me, he's like, yeah, we're not sure if that if you're on the stage and you're singing that could you promise us that you're not going to talk about your past when we're performing? And I was just like, dude, I don't talk 24/7 about my abuse. I'll do it on an interview, right? But as soon as this interview is over, I'm doing other stuff with my life, And
yeah. So they're mistaking your advocacy work and you speaking out as your entire identity because that's what they've seen of you. I'm so sorry that's been your experience, and I want to get your opinion on if you think that has anything to do with being in Europe or if you think it's different in the US. I'm only asking because we mostly do interviews, or I feel like 85% of our interviews are in the US, and I want to get your opinion on the culture of what it's like out there for you.
Well, in Europe, I think here, especially in Switzerland, we have this very strong culture of we do not speak about the monsters. We do not speak about Esca. That makes us uncomfortable. That's also why my third book is ironically called No One Speaks About the Monsters, because there's this like this whole stigma of when I talk. I used to work in an area in a line of work where I worked with a lot of old people, as does my wife, by the way. And she says, ask any woman over the age of 60, 70, all of them will have horror stories, incest, rape, sibling sex, all of that stuff. But they all shut up about it and carry it with them until they're like in the old folks home, and then maybe they'll tell a nurse about it, and that's it. That's, And I interviewed a blind woman actually on my channel who was like, awful story. I mean, first she was raped, and then her children were raped by another guy, and I mean, just staggering. And I meet a lot of people like that, especially because I'm so outspoken. So I get a lot of emails saying like, oh yeah, I would really like to talk to you. And, so I do a lot of this kind of pro bono stuff where sometimes I get like a message at 2:00 in the morning from somebody I don't know say, I'm about to kill myself and I saw you. And I was just like, maybe you could talk me out of this. And I'm just like,
that's a lot to take in, Phil.
Yeah, but it's how it is. And I think that, I don't know, maybe in the US you're more outspoken about stuff like that, or but I feel like over here in Europe, we have this huge hurdle to get over, especially here in Switzerland, where it's like, we shut the fuck up about abuse. We don't talk about it. If you talk about it, then you just want sympathy and you just want attention. And oh yeah, stop crying about it and stop being a poor me. And it's like, oh, come on, you're 44 years old. That happened 30 years ago. Like, get over yourself, basically. I mean, I even had a police officer tell me that. And I'm not making this up. It's in my first book, actually, I mentioned that, where I'm like giving my statement to a policewoman. A police officer comes in and he's just like, people like you make me sick. You should, stop complaining about everyone has a hard life and you should, just move on. And all you guys want is to come here and then like get money for something bad that happened to you. And the policewoman actually she actually stood up and told him to leave the room. I felt like something snapped in me when he said that. I think also the reason why I speak so provocatively and so openly about this is because I want the viewer to understand the rage that simmers in a person like me. For basically, like, I lost my childhood, okay? I lost all my teenage years. I lost most of my adult life trying to figure out how to survive. And then I spent a good 18 years being a good dad to my kids, so I completely gave up my music career as well. And the last little bit of dignity I have left is to tell my story and the veritas of my story and of the person who I am. And so if you attack that as well, then it's like, well, how did they say it? Fear the man who has nothing to lose, right? So if you take away that last little bit of dignity and of self-worth that I have, and by calling me a liar or calling me somebody who wants to leech off society or, is trying to like, grovel for money or whatever, that is like, dude, then you're really attacking the last little part of me that's left standing, and then I won't stand for that,
Well, I think that's another reason why we have this channel, is to help other people learn compassion and help other people see the ramifications of trauma. It doesn't matter how long ago it happened, how it sticks with you, how the PTSD sticks with you, or the CPTSD, and how really what people need is just someone to say, I hear you, I see you, I'm sorry, let me listen. What do you need? Just someone to listen. We don't even need anyone to fix it, right? Like, we're not asking for people to fix us, in quotes. We're asking people to just be there and to hear us and see us.
I think that whole approach to fixing, I think that's inherently evil and wrong.
Because there's nothing
broken. You and I are not broken.
Yeah. And I think that's a misconception, right? When people talk about their traumas and they're seeking that just validation of, I hear you, people mistakenly think, oh, they need help. They need me to jump in. They need me to intervene. And that's not usually the case, right? I mean, of course, there are situations where people are reaching out to you and asking for help and asking you to intervene. But most of the time, we just want someone to understand us and to see us and to maybe to see things from our perspective. We don't need someone to say, how do you want me to fix it? Because like you said, we're not broken and we don't want to be made to feel broken either.
Just be treated normal, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you apply for a job or you apply for a gig, okay, let's say if I was single, right? Do you think in all the years when I was a musician traveling the world and having lots of fun with lots of different women, do you think it would have ever crossed my mind to tell one of these women, oh, I got sexually assaulted by my father? Hell no, And I think it's sad. I think I should have been able to do that. I've spoken to so many rape victims across the board. And also, I seem to also attract them too. I've dated, God knows, at least 20. Off the top of my head, I could tell you that I have all in some way, shape, or form been abused or whatever. I would have actually liked to be able to share my own experiences, but the first time I actually started speaking about it was, in 2015. When I started to slowly say to my siblings, it's like, guys, I think I knew I remembered it, right? But I didn't want to come across as, oh yeah, how are you going to oh, you're drinking beer with your brother. It's like, oh, by the way, Stephen raped me when I was a kid, right? It's like, so you're like, yeah, I think Stephen touched me and, you remember anything like that? So, and I had to warm myself up to that too. And now I just say it because I'm over it. But I think 2 years ago when I did my first public interview for national TV here in Switzerland, I just completely shut down quite a few times and just was shaking and crying and all of that. And now I just, I say it because it's, I'm steeled against it now. And I think also that's a thing that affects people's perception of me, is that they think, oh yeah, he's just talking like it's normal and even smiling and laughing or whatever. So this guy is absolutely unbelievable, because they think, oh, if I were raped, I'd be crying in the corner in the corner of a shower, right? Which is what people do. Here's the thing though, you need to be able to pass that stage in order to be able to even speak about it to yourself. And then you need to speak about it to somebody who's close to you. And then you need to build up the courage to speak out again. And I know at least half a dozen people who would love to do an interview with me on my channel about childhood abuse and all that. The list keeps growing and growing and growing. Why do you think on my channel there's so few people that actually make it to the channel to actually talk about it? It's because it's one thing to say, I want to. It's another thing. It's a very different thing to actually go out and actually do it.
Trauma looks different for everybody. So the way that you react to something could be completely different than somebody else. We do have people who come on and laugh through things, and we get those comments of why are they laughing? This is uncomfortable. Because it's a trauma response. People have different responses, and that's okay. And it's not our job to judge how someone processes something. It's not our job to say, well, it happened this long ago, so by now they should be fine. It doesn't matter. Everyone goes through the process differently. Everyone grieves differently. Everyone goes through those stages differently in different amounts of time, and they also go back and weave through each other. It's not a linear process. There's ups and downs, and anger may come out, and then you may be sad, and then you may be hurt, and then you may go back to anger, and all of that is okay because it's processing it, it's getting through it. So I do think it's important to note that everyone is going to tell their story in a different way, and that's totally fine. That's absolutely okay, because it's your decision. It's how you want to do it. And that's one of the smallest things that I can gift to our guests, right? Tell your story how you feel comfortable, because I want to put you in the driver's seat. I want you to feel in control, and I want you to feel comfortable, because all of this is so hard to do. And I think people sometimes forget that when they turn on the channel and they watch these stories. They forget that, and that's why I always start the interview with, these are real people telling their stories. This is not just a random show on HBO. This is not something that was just written by a writer in a writer's room. This is a real
Imagine that
trauma for people.
I got accused of that, right? Also by my stepfather, but also by a couple other people who read my book, right? And they're like, what kind of sick weirdo writes a horror fiction with explicit scenes of child sexual abuse? And I'm like, yeah, if I would be making that shit up, it would be very sick of me to write stuff like that. Here's the thing though, I'm not. And the reason why I'm putting it into a fictional format is because when I started writing it, I couldn't get myself to live through that stuff in the first person. So I had to put myself in the third person, give myself an alter ego and other identity. The first book was hell on earth. I would sometimes I would write from 7 in the morning to around 11:30. And then I had to snap out of it. I'd go get my kids from school after just writing about, being tortured and sexually abused and stuff like that. And I'd snap out of it. I'd be like, hey kids, what do you want to eat for lunch? It was a very educational experience.
Yeah, it's hard to write stuff down. I've been trying to write my book for a few years now. There are times where I'm like, yes, I'm getting it. I got like 2 chapters in one day. And then I wait months to write anything.
You're going about this wrong. You're going about this wrong. As a veteran writer, I'm gonna give you a very, 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 very simple task. Set yourself a goal of 3 pages per day. That's easy. 3 pages is basically an angry email to a customer service, right? So write 3 pages and then stop yourself and then go back the next day and write 3 pages. And if you're like, oh yeah, but I think I could do 5, then do 5. But it's like doing muscle reps, right?
Yeah.
Don't do more than you can, because then your muscles will be exhausted the next day and then you won't want to go train again. So start yourself slowly, but then keep at it. That's what I tell myself. If I don't force myself to write 4 pages a day or 5 pages a week or however what I decide to do, because I do a ton of other stuff on the side, I force myself to say, okay, this week I'm going to write 5 pages, or I'm going to write 3 pages every day, or however. But I set myself that goal. Then it also gives me this incredible feeling of, oh yeah, now I want to write, because then the rest of the day I'm like thinking about, oh yeah, this I could write and that I could write, and then and then I sit down and then it's just like, and then I finish like the 3-4 pages. And then I proofread it and I go over it again. And it's like, okay, can I word this a little bit better? Can I construct a paragraph different? And so I'm also like proofreading myself at the same time. So it takes me double as long. And I also translate my work directly into German as well on top of it. So
that's great advice. And I'll try it if I ever get a spare moment. Maybe once I get sleeping through the night again, when my baby stops waking up, then I'll have a little more brain capacity to get amped.
When the kids have the baby, then... but writing when you're tired is fun. I used to compose the amazing poetry completely zonked out of my head.
Well, how about this? You could be my accountability buddy, and just be like, hey, Shalice, have you started writing again? Life is just crazy, and this channel is awesome, and it's a lot of work. So I'm doing my best.
I can imagine.
So let's go back to you, though. That was a fun little tangent. But let's talk about the consequences of continuing to speak, right? So you did an interview with us a year ago. You had very real consequences, but you told me you wanted to come back on again. So are you afraid that continuing the conversation is going to further impede your success?
No, not at all, because in the very real world, I am an author, and I am also a singer, a songwriter, an artist, and people like me, we need an audience. Right? Because audiences at the end of the day, first of all, they validate who we are as performers, as artists, as speakers, as people with a history. But also it helps us to, in a very real way, also generate a certain kind of income which can be used in the real world to actually support. If I had like an hourly salary for all the work I put into my music, into my book writing, into doing interviews and all that, I wouldn't even make 50 cents an hour, okay? So it's obviously not about like, I'm not going to ever get rich off of this. I like the challenge. I think that when other people see me so brazenly speak about these horrific things, that it might actually give people the motivation to also, write about their own stories about going to their family, being like, yeah, look, this dude over here, he abused me as a kid. And I have a very powerful testimony for you guys. One of the women that was abused by Stephen, she wrote an affidavit 2 years ago when we first took him to court. And I'll tell you, I actually went to Hanover myself and I confronted him in person with the affidavit that she wrote. And she called me 2 weeks ago, and for the first time, she actually called the police. And she reported her own father for sexually abusing her entire childhood. And she told me that constantly seeing me out there, constantly talking about it, being relentless, and never, ever taking no for an answer, and never stepping down, and never bowing to anybody, and never taking any shit from anybody, gave her the strength to be able to write and call the police I'd say, yes, I'd actually like to make a statement about my own physical, biological father who sexually raped and abused me from when I was a very small child all the way up until I was a preteen. Mm-hmm. So my actions have very real consequences in the real world, and very powerful ones and very positive ones. And I think also when people say, hey, this guy he has no fear. He has no remorse, no regret. He's out there, he's doing it. And I mean, yeah, this costs energy, this costs money, this microphone costs money, that camera costs money, these guitars cost money. Yeah, obviously. I mean, you need to somehow be able to finance all of that. Originally, I wrote my first book because I thought I was going to maybe try to sell like 1,000 copies to get a lawyer. So I could take that lawyer in Germany and stick him on my parents in civil court, because in how do you say, in criminal court, all of that stuff is expired, right? But in civil court, I could go after him for like, not paying me a salary, dragging me every day to go witnessing, to go busk, to make money for them. I mean, sometimes my stepfather and I, we would make like $300, $400, $500 a day, and like my entire childhood. And I worked like 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, cleaning, shoveling snow, sorting rotten food in the basement, cooking. I mean, you name it, I did it. If you don't pay somebody for work, that's slavery. And slavery has no expiration date. It has no statute of limitations, which technically means if I managed to get a lawyer that would actually be like, okay, we're going to get to the nitty gritty of this and go to the court for human rights in the Netherlands, I might still have a chance of getting my parents put in prison. But how are you going to fund that? How? I live in Switzerland. Even to make a phone call to Germany costs money. To drive over there costs money. When I first started out, I probably wrote over 300-400 lawyers in Germany, asking them to maybe help me pro bono. And then if the court would like give me, like in the US, you can get like a lawyer, then they'd be like, okay, whatever money you make, I'll take a cut, and then I'll do the front work for free, right? Here in Europe, it doesn't work like that. They want their $300 up front, and that's for every hour. So it's on you as the victim to first come up with like 20,000 francs to pay a lawyer so they even look into it. And that's basically where the buck stops, right? And then I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to write a book, see if I can sell a couple copies. And then, of course, being self-employed, all of a sudden realizing, oh, I'm not getting this many gigs anymore. And I started getting panic attacks on top of it. Like at the moment, I can't go play on my own anymore, because the last couple times where I went to go do a concert on my own, like I just completely froze up in the car and like had a massive panic attack. I'm doing all of this on my own, contacting lawyers, doing the interviews, writing the books, writing testimonies, putting all of this information on my website. All of this I'm doing at my own time. And I spend all day, every day doing it, and I don't have an income, right? So my income is basically printing t-shirts, selling books, doing the occasional gig, and thank God my wife works 100%, because otherwise I have no idea how I would do it. And if you say, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart, then people are like, yeah, but then how do you live, right? And then if you say, oh, well, actually, when I tell my story and I try to sell my books, it's also because I need to finance myself somehow. They're like, you see, got you. That's your motive. You want money, and that's why you're making all of this shit up. So it's a very difficult line to walk, because I also said in another interview just recently, it's like if I would sue my parents, and even like if the state awarded me $500,000, let's say they would award me $500,000 in damages for all the torture I went through, all the free work I did as a slave for them or whatever, I wouldn't want any of their money. I would probably take that $500,000 and put it in a trust fund and then like help other people, because I think that like if I would ever make any money from my story, that would take away my credibility. And that scares me. That's the ambivalence I have towards the whole thing. That's why I prefer, when I sell my books, for example, I could say, this is a fictional book. This has nothing to do with my real life testimony. This is a product that I make, just like my music is a product or my t-shirts are a product. So if you want to support me as an activist, as a writer, as a musician, then you buy a product which is unrelated to my story. Because like that, it feels like I still have my veritas. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's hard to navigate, and I completely understand. It's like you said, it's a fine line. And I think what you're saying, if I were to summarize it, what you're saying is doing things like this, doing shows, interviews, podcasts, it helps you find the right audience. It's going to help you find people who can support you and lift you up, and the wrong audience, the people who are putting you down for speaking up, you are ignoring those and finding your tribe, essentially, finding the people who want to help you, finding the people who are wanting to validate you and support you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We couldn't do this if we didn't have the financial capabilities of doing it and all the equipment and hiring editors and things. And we made it so it's our full-time job. We couldn't do that without the survivors, and we couldn't do that without our audience who are supporting and watching and showing respect and compassion either. So it's just one big community that is raising each other up, which gives us the opportunity to platform people, platform survivors, and hopefully lift them up. And because we do have people watching, thousands of people watching, it gives us the opportunity to do this full time. So I've quit my day job of costuming and doing wardrobe for films and TV and sparsely acting. And then Jonathan is phasing out his DJ career, which he's done for 11 years. And so it's really a beautiful thing when people come together and they want to support each other and they want to amplify people's voices and they want to share. I mean, I say over and over, we could not do this channel if people weren't willing to share and tell their stories.
Yeah. And I would like to make something perfectly clear. Yes, of course, I have a monetary interest in coming onto your channel because that gives me a target audience where I could hopefully sell some books or some wearables that I make. Or if you go on my website, I have like singles out. I do have a 4-octave range, so that's fun to listen to, from way down in the basement all the way up to almost sopran. At the end of the day, like we both said, it's a fine line. You need to find your community. You need to find other people that like you and support you, and maybe not just for the story, but also for the person who's behind the story. And I think when it's all said and done, I'm not just a survivor. I'm not just somebody with a story. I'm a human being that has a huge arsenal of potential, of talent, of skill. I think also by coming onto your show, I can find people that appreciate that appreciate also the story. How does a 15-year-old go from being homeless with just a shirt on his back and a bongo to 27 years later having his own recording studio, a shit ton of guitars, just loving life and having, cool microphones and doing cool projects. And I started up a film studio now near where I live, where I put the whole basement in like green screen and everything like that. And I did my first green screen attempt on my YouTube channel. I covered Creep, which is hilarious. It's still very amateurish, but it's just, I don't know. I live and I breathe art. That's what I do. Like from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I'm either writing, I'm composing, I'm drawing. I'm just always up there with my head in the clouds. So like I don't know, I could show you something I did just now. I did that today.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're doing so many different things, and I love all of the creative channels that you've created for yourself. And we're going to put all of the links in the description of this video if anyone wants to check out the merchandise or your music or your YouTube channel. All of that will be in one easy place to find. So I just need your Linda Listen moment, your sassy statement, as the viral video with the toddler goes, or something inspirational.
Be nice. Right? I mean, I think that's, for me, the bottom line is just be compassionate, be nice, have fun, be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
I think just don't take yourself too seriously. Life can be awesome and an absolute shithole simultaneously. And it is always. I mean, we have war, hunger, disease, famine, children getting run over by trucks, hospitals collapsing, all of that. But at the same time, we've got butterflies, we got children that think that unicorns exist, and we have being able to fall in love. We have beautiful moments of gazing up into the starry sky and wondering where we're going to go when we die. And I mean, see, you can constantly choose. For me, I like to think of walking through life as walking constantly on the edge of a precipice, and I can either look to my left and see all the beauty that life has to offer, or I can constantly look down towards death and destruction. And it's up to me in which direction I look. But I just know that the more I look down to the precipice, more likely I'm going to probably fall in. And I struggle with PTSD. I've been recently diagnosed with borderline. I'm learning to get to know myself still after 27 years, like discovering, oh, there are still like demons, there are monsters that still walk with me, like learning how to deal with aggression, learning how to deal with paranoia, learning how to deal with low self-esteem and all of that. And yeah, if I let myself get pulled in by these thoughts, like thinking, oh, nobody likes me, everyone thinks my art is shit, or everyone thinks my writing is shit, or everyone thinks my music sucks and all of that, then yeah, I'm just gonna go and destroy myself, right? Or I can just choose to grab my guitar and feel good, and just feel happy, and just sing from my chest. And if I feel pain, then just grab a guitar and sing the pain away, and maybe something good comes out of it,
Man, music is such a great coping mechanism. Mine is dance. So I'm not great at any instruments. I can kind of play the piano, but dance is my thing. That's my de-stressor. So I know you wanted to sing Little Black Sheep. Do you want to sing that for everybody?
Yeah, of course. This is a song that I heard a musician by the name of Brian Robert Pierce, who became my mentor for a moment. We played together for a couple months, and then I think in September, he actually left me to fend for myself short of my 16th birthday, because he was of the opinion that if I really wanted to make it in the world, that I would have to learn how to be by myself and to play and to sing and make money by myself. And funny story, so I went to the first terrace that I ever played on my own, played 3 songs, and ran away. I didn't pass the hat. Because like I was so used to passing the hat, like with other, like also like in the cult, like it would always be Steven singing and I would go past the hat, but it's always passing the hat for someone else. And even though when I was like duoing with Brian, I was never passing the hat for something that I sang, even though I was doing half of the performance. It was always like I'm passing the hat for him. But then all of a sudden I had to pass the hat for myself, and I completely panicked. This was a Neuchâtel. I had this brand new $200 plywood guitar that sounded like shit. I already started writing songs at the time, so I sang like 3 of my own original songs, because that's what you did back then. If you didn't know any songs, you wrote your own songs, because that was cheaper than to go buy a CD and learn, and try to get a booklet and all of that. It was a lot of work back in the day. It's not like now you could just type in a song, you have all the chords and everything, you know what I mean? So back then, if you were a street musician and broke, you wrote your own material and then you went and go sing it. So all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm playing like the first few songs that I ever wrote when I was 15. And then I just panic. And then I just pick up my guitar case and I just start walking away. And then this couple, I remember distinctly, they're like, hey, hey, hey. And I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, no, you, the musician, in French, like, le musicien, come, viens, viens, viens. So I turn around and like, oh shit. But they're like, then they take a 5 franc piece and they put it in my hand. They're like, oh, you were so good. Why don't you pass the hat? I was like, I didn't know, and I lied, I was like, I didn't know I was supposed to. And they're like, no, we'll do it for you, come. So they call me back, they buy me a Coca-Cola, I play another song, and then his girlfriend goes, passes the hat, she makes like, I don't know, 20, 25 bucks and just gives it to me. And I swear I almost melted on the spot, like I was shaking and almost was crying, like I completely, like I had a quite the moment there, and I had to really gather myself, because I was like, yeah, men don't cry, and tough guy, And yeah, after that, I went to the next terrace, and then I just had to keep forcing myself. I just keep telling myself, yeah. And I mean, I got a lot of flack too back in the day. I mean, I had people saying, oh, you sound like a crow with his throat slit. I had people like in Bern, I got physically assaulted twice. A story for another time, I guess. In the south of Spain, I was playing, and this guy just came up and tried to punch me in the face while I was singing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, here's the funny thing too. I don't know how I did it, but I kind of reached around and I grabbed him and I had him like here. And then I just like knelt on him and I put my foot down on top of him, and then I continued to play with him underneath my foot. True story.
Okay, let's hear this song.
Yeah, it was wild back then. Little black sheep, don't cry. Keep your faith. Hold your head high. Be yourself, you are fine. And and watch those white sheep come into line. And they say you must change, oh, from acting so strange. And they say you should be what they choose to arrange you to be. Little black sheep in time, you will find other sheep of your kind, and to help you to see you can be what you want to be. And white sheep want you to hide what you're feeling inside, while they run for their shelter, they see that you ride through the storm. Little black sheep, don't cry. Keep your faith and hope your head high. Be yourself, you are fine. And watch those white sheep come into life. And they say you must change, oh, from acting so strange. And they say you should be what they choose to arrange you to be. Little black sheep in time, you will find other sheep of your kind, and they'll help you to see you can be what you want to be.
I loved it. That was great.
It's a great song.
That's so fitting.
Yeah, that's why I swear, the first time I heard that song when I was 15, I just, boom, you know?
So good. Yeah, we'll have to create a t-shirt or something that's like, be the black sheep.
I'm more than happy to do some artwork for you guys. I love doing artwork, and I do every style too, like from completely abstract to hyper-realistic. I got myself a big Galman pad at the beginning of this year because before I only did pencil art. Then I started on digital, and I have if you go on my website, ever since we did the last interview, I've been mad with drawing digitally. So I created a lot of very fun stuff in all kinds of directions and styles. You want to see an original piece from one of my pencil drawings before you go?
Sure.
A lot of this art I did over 10 years ago. Here's one that maybe... This is this is a very specific picture because when we were growing up in the cult, we had a picture of Jesus in every room that was drawn very similar to this. But I drew him like, how do you say, as corrupted, corrupted by money, corrupted by everything. So he's got like the sparrow in his head, like pretending to be, but, he's got the dollar sign in his eye and he's like half rotten. And so it's like this, with the heaven in the moon, which the cult believed that the heaven was hidden in the moon. So this is very very dark about how I see the beliefs of the cult. I'm not saying I want to insult anyone who believes in Jesus or God. This is has nothing to do with this. This is a simple depiction of how a religion can be corrupted. This is called Stay. It's about letting go. And there's a poem that goes with this about the man. He's already dead, basically, but he can't let go of life, and he doesn't want to say goodbye to his teddy bears. So he's just sitting there, refusing to pass on. And it's to me, it's a very powerful statement about letting go of the past and not letting things die with you, but always trying to move towards rebirth and reinventing yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And thanks for coming on and sharing with us again. And we'll put all of the links, as we mentioned, in the description so people can easily find you. Do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, my main goal is I want to normalize that victims of abuse can speak freely and feel like they're still complete 100% members of our society, and not feel like they have anything to fear about opening up and sharing. Just always remember, if you are the victim of abuse, it's not on you to be ashamed of your abuse. I'm going to tell you one quick anecdote before we go. Somebody in Germany, where my parents lived, figured out that my parents live in their town. So they made a flyer and they distributed it to every single household, saying with the name of my parents and the address of my parents that these people are child abusers, and to warn them, right? And one neighbor apparently got angry and wrote me on Instagram saying basically, how dare I distribute the information like that maybe some child could have found that and been very disturbed by it. And then my reaction was basically, well, yeah, but would you have rather than maybe that my parents, who like to work with children, would have had access to the children and maybe actually done something to them and traumatize them even more than maybe just a factual information saying, oh, these people are child molesters. I mean, and she didn't write anything graphic, right? And then I said something very important, which is what I want to give all of you viewers out there to take with you on your day or night or wherever you are in the world. It's not on the victim to shut the fuck up about their abuse. It's on the perpetrator to not abuse somebody in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we have perpetrators out there abusing children, we should be speaking out openly and freely, because maybe at some point, if all of us abused out there have no issue with being able to talk openly about it, it's not on the victim to not speak out about their abuse. It's on the perpetrator to stop abusing in the first place. And if us victims all normalize being able to just speak freely about our abuse, it will probably, in my opinion, hinder perpetrators in the future of abusing children if they know that, oh, a child is not going to be intimidated by, oh, yeah, I can't tell anybody about this horrific thing that happened to me. Because if we all are just be like, oh, yeah, I was abused as a kid, so what? I'm not the asshole. The person that abused me is.
Yeah.
And there it is.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That's what I want to give to all of you. Is that strength that I want to lift you guys up to make you just feel like it's normal. It's okay to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it's not on us to shut the fuck up about the horrible things that happened to us. It's on the people who do horrible things to stop doing those horrible things.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing. And everyone, remember to leave those kind words of encouragement down below. We really appreciate you commenting. Boost the algorithm. It just helps everybody all around. And if you want to support the channel, we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. Liz, thank you so much. Our newest patron. We appreciate you. And if you want to check out some merch, you can check that out at cults2consciousness.com. We are trying to book out this trip to Mexico. We are hoping to get enough spots filled. We didn't spend a whole lot of time promoting it, but it would be so much fun to go to Mexico with you guys. Our Costa Rica trip was absolutely incredible. We had full boat. It was just so awesome getting to meet everybody. So check that out. The link is in the description. I think we have a little bit less than 30 days to book that out. If you want to find shorter clips of our show, if you prefer shorter things every now and then, we have 8 to 10 minute clips on our sister channel at Cults to Consciousness Clips, where you may see some episodes that you may have missed in the past. And if you like this episode, I'll link 2 more down here below. We do have a playlist for Children of God, and we really appreciate you checking those out as well. So until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.